You've been very patient with your time. If I could just ask a few final questions and anything you want to add, please do. You know, in my walk as a lawmaker, and I've been in Congress now 33 years, I often differentiate between criticism that mocks and belittles, that is cheap shots, and criticism that is constructive and leads to better outcomes. I would ask you and invite you, you did listen to the administration witnesses earlier in the first panel. You know and you understand the administration's policies vis-a-vis the Sahel. I wonder if you could offer this panel any constructive criticism that might lead to better outcomes, number one. Secondly, and Mr. Atallah, in your testimony, you heard Nancy Lindborg say earlier that while the recent rise of violent extremism in West Africa cannot be directly attributed to drought, chronic food security, or weak governance, each of these factors can indirectly exacerbate instability in the region. And you made three very specific recommendations at the end of your testimony. One is that USAID get back into the fight, and you pointed out that there are access restrictions, which our embassy imposes and others impose. If you could elaborate on that. Secondly, you talk about border security. I wonder if you might tell us to what degree are you talking about? How much, you know, is it technical aid? Is it actual foreign aid that would beef up their ability to have a more secure border? And finally, you've pointed out that to effectively counter the jihad narrative wielded by AQIM, a comprehensive and expertly crafted information operation campaign is necessary for the region. And that is, I think, a very profound recommendation, but I wonder if you might tell us how that might be done, and others might want to speak to that as well. But the first one will be on constructive criticism, and then to speak to the three or elaborate on the recommendations that you made.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, constructive criticism, I think sir, I think you asked a question is, what is AFRICOM doing? A component of AFRICOM is SACAF. I think SACAF can be deeply rooted in the fight, but with restrictions, we're not taking enough steps. I know the command is ready. I know the command wants to go in. I know they have several plans to go in. However, there are some political dynamics that prohibit them from doing so. And my first criticism is I think we need to get in there. There could be some assistance in targeting key AQIM, Mujao, Ansari leaders, Iyad Aghali, Mukhtar Bal-Mukhtar. I can go on and on. There are several of them that are still floating around the region, and we have experience in other parts of the world that we can bring to bear in this area. That's number one. Number two, although AID is doing some work, a lot more can be done. Again, in the band of the Sahara, and when I talk about northern Mali, northern Niger, southern Libya, southern Algeria, all the way across to northern Chad, the peoples of this part of the world are really marginalized by their host governments. And a call from Kidal, for example, a person was telling me that there is very little food resources and medical resources. Médecins du Monde, which is an NGO that provides some medical aid, has a couple of workers up in Kidal, but not enough to meet all the needs. We need to get those folks up there. In order to do so, it requires, of course, soft elements to provide that security. So that is, in a sense, a criticism of the lack of involvement in the region. In answer to the questions you asked specifically to my statement, I've flown across the entire band of the Sahara. I used to do that for the Defense Intelligence Agency. I've landed on every dirt strip in the northern parts of the Sahara, from Mali, Niger, and Chad. There's no radar. Movements of aircraft can go back and forth. People can land, say, in Kidal. They can land in Tessalit. They can land in other parts of the Sahara, literally without anybody knowing about it. Number two, the movements across the Sahara in some of these difficult areas, because geographically, if you take the highest peaks of the mountains in, say, southern Algeria, the Ahagar Mountains, into the Adrars in Mali and the Air Mountains in Niger, that band over there has some very treacherous terrain. And people move very freely within those areas. It's very difficult for the host countries to have any visibility or control. So we need to do that in effect. In terms of messaging, AQIM is very apt. Like I said, they have a Twitter account, and they've used Facebook continuously. There was a Facebook page, and I mentioned that in my written statement, that popped up after the attack on the gas plant in Algeria. Mukhtar Belmokhtar, the guy who crafted the strategy for its face, went on Facebook on a site called the Derna Media Center, which stands for Derna, Libya. Within a matter of weeks, it was taken down. But the number of people that joined that, literally in a 2-week span, was 4,000, basically touting Mukhtar Belmokhtar as a hero of what he did in Algeria. It doesn't mean all these people are joining AQIM. However, it means that they're getting an audience, whether it's through Twitter, it's through Facebook, or whatnot. What we need to do is counter that in order to prevent additional recruits in the future and to prevent things like we're seeing right now in Mali, suicide bombers.
You mentioned Mukhtar. I thought he was killed.
Ma'am, he wasn't killed. That was a mention from the Chadian side. The Chadian president came out and said that he was killed, but Mukhtar Belmokhtar is still alive. In fact, jihadi forums came out and did say publicly that he is still alive. The only person who is confirmed killed, and the French had to confirm it publicly, was Abu Zaid. There are several others, but Mukhtar Belmokhtar is still around.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
I think we just really have to ask ourselves the very basic question, and that is it the illness we're going after or the symptoms? Fighting terrorism, fighting the Mukhtars by whatever name is a little bit like that game. You have the groundhog that comes up, you smash its head here, and it pops up here, you smash it here, it pops up there. It's never ending. I mean, if one does not get in there and treat that hunger and that poverty and that desperation, you just simply cannot win the war. You cannot. So the question then becomes, well, yes, this has to be done. Can we and how do we get to the real root issues so that in the end, it's the people living in that area, it's their leaderships that have to come back forward and say, okay, what are we going to do to really stabilize? We're not going to stabilize. They're going to have to stabilize it. I mean, let's be honest in the end. What is the only answer there? It's almost, I was chuckling earlier, reminiscent of my grandmother when I was studying political philosophy, and, she said, what I mean by this is, the grandmother from the old Yugoslavia, this is very brilliant. You guys are all very wise. He said, but can I spread this on bread and eat it? Can I do that? That wisdom of yours? And there's too much at times that we focus elections, and there's going to be a discussion. I mean, I don't even want to count how many national dialogues have gone on in various countries on this continent. But when do we get on? When does the civil society and the people all say, hey, what about us? We want to eat. We want to grow up like the rest of the world is going forward. So really, I think that focus has got to come also from the people themselves, their own national leadership, to pull out what is, in the end, the absolute necessity, and that is treat that symptom. Treat the disease, not the symptom. It is poverty. It is hunger. It is desperation. And that is where, if there's a positive criticism, it's a realization from the development agency and others. There's been no surprise. There's a drought every so many years. There's instability every so many years in Sahel. We could have predicted everything that's been happening. The issue is recognize it and then or deal with it with the amount of time it's necessary. If it's 20 years, if it's these kind of resources, recognize what it is and do it, or say, you know what, we can't do it. That's the reality to me. Over. Thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. If in terms of constructive, if I might I call it constructive suggestion. If you look, Mali was very important in terms of U.S. security activities in the region prior to the war and the coup. And since then, clearly the French and the Europeans have a heavier presence. My suggestion then will be for the U.S. to say, look, we weren't here just to kill our enemies, and if some other soldiers are here, then we are not interested. It should be actually, I would like the U.S. to send a message to the Malians and the regions that we want to play a big role in your reconstruction and your recovery. So that will be that the U.S. should have a bigger presence. I did a little calculation of the pledges in Brussels, and from what I can tell, based on what the U.S. has already put down and then requests that they have made to Congress, and I could have gotten some things wrong, but it's about a 5% contribution to what has been pledged for Mali. I wish it was more. And secondly, in terms of specific things, again, I think Mali, because it is the test case, what the U.S. does with Mali sends a message to the rest of the region, and I will say the elections. Again, I think there are worrisome signs. I don't think the elections can be stopped or rolled back, but I do think that there should be a contingency plan for quickly reacting and helping the Malians make sure that it goes well. And finally, my big point, which is that we need to do a review to say, over these years and with Libya and Mali haven't happened, what have we learned? How can we re-engage the region to have security? Because security comes first and good governance comes first, and other things will follow. Thank you again.
Thank you very much for your testimonies. Thank you for your insights and counsel. It is very helpful to the committees that have met to receive it, and we will follow up on it. So I thank you so very much. I would also ask unanimous consent that a written testimony from Sherry Brennenbach, the President and CEO of the United States African Development Foundation, be made a part of the record. I again want to thank Speaker Touré for being here for the entirety of the hearing. We often have visiting diplomats and even speakers like yourself. This is the first time, and this is about my 400th hearing, that we've ever had a speaker come and stay and listen to the entirety of the proceeding. You do us a great honor by doing so. I want to thank you for your ambassador, Mamoun Keita, who's been a great help over the years and will continue to be, I'm sure. And again, I want to thank our witnesses. Your testimonies were extraordinary. Hearing is adjourned.